part of me. So that's my.
So these are real people that you write about.
They're fictionalized, but they're inspired by real people and by real happenings.
Very good. How has your writing been influenced by being an Italian-American woman?
I feel like everything I do is influenced by that, because that's a reality. And in my writing, it always comes forth in some way or other, whether it's in just my narrator's voice, the way that I speak, or in the characters, or the understandings that I have about things like life and death, and turmoil, and leaving things behind, and all of that. So I think it's always present. I want to write books, and I do write books that anybody could pick up and they could enter, but that doesn't mean that I soften the reality of it. What I want, I think, is for an Italian-American person to pick it up and feel like they're at home, and for someone else to pick it up and learn something that's not the usual go-tos of mafia, or some stereotype. So I think that's how I approach that. But even in my poetry, there's always Italian-American things, and sometimes other people aren't as interested as I would like them to be. But I keep going, and because I think that our literature really matters, and if you don't accept it the first time, I'm going to keep putting it in front of you.
Good for you. And that's one of our missions here at the Italian Cultural Center, is to save our stories and get our story in writing. Because if we don't put the truth out there, others will misinterpret or use their own narrative to tell our story for us. So it's important that we celebrate writers like yourself and the work that you do to put our, to give up so authenticity to our stories. So thank you. And that's also we have this Italian American authors event once a year, and we like to promote our stories. I feel that even if you're writing a story that's not about anything Italian American, your heritage comes out. Just like you were saying, there's a little bit of a perspective that comes out, and so I think it does influence our writing.
Can I jump in and say
yes.
something really quickly too? If any of you are writing poetry, fiction, nonfiction, I just want you to know that there's an excellent online journal on top of the things that are done here called Ovunque Siamo, and we're always taking submissions, and just because you haven't done it before, if you haven't, or maybe you do, keep us in mind, because one of the things that online journal is doing is preserving the stories, and you don't have to write about Italian things. You just have to be new Italian American writer.
What's the name of the thing again?
Ovunque Siamo.
Thank you.
Ovunque.
And also our Italian Women in Chicago book, which I keep talking about, give Italian women a voice that may not have been previously heard. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa, speaking of the JCCIA and women, given that there is a women's division, must have meant that there was a need for a women's division within the JCCIA. So can you tell us about your role in the women's division, and why did you specifically join the?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I believe that the JCCI was made up of just gentlemen in the past. So I think that's why the women's division came about many, many years ago. I got involved. I used to attend some events, like the women's division did a cookie exchange at Christmas time back then, and I ran into an old friend of mine. She was chairing that at the time, Enza. So I said, I had raised my kids, so I said, I have time and I want to get more involved now. So I ended up on her board, and then ended up as JCCI first vice president, and worked with Frank. We had a really great team, did a lot of wonderful things, and as part of being on the JCCI board, I joined the women's division as well. They're together, but they're separate, because the women's division does certain things. So with the women's division, they do their fashion show every year or whatnot, but I thought there could be some new things added to it and suggested we do Festa della Donna, something that is celebrated in Italy, but a lot of the ladies never even heard of it in Chicago. So we started doing that 4 years ago and recognizing Italian American women. The first year we had a theme of just regular, I don't want to say regular women, but extraordinary women who did videos for us. And I think it might have been during the time of COVID or right before. We're going on 4 years with this, so I don't know, I've lost those 2 years. 3 years. And then the next year, I think it was actually during COVID, we recognized women first responders and teachers, people who were public servants. So we did a video, they all did videos for us on then, and every day of the month we do some things during the month of March, which is really nice, posted on Facebook. If we had the Festa della Donna event, like we are having this month, many of them came and attended. And last year we did a compilation of women's stories. Everybody wrote a little short story about either their traditions or memory about their family or something like that. That authors usually do, but this was just all members who have wanted to submit something. So we had a nice little booklet that everybody went home with. And then this year, we were doing the authors. So every day during the month of March will be an Italian American woman author that we put together, and we are doing our Festa della Donna event, as mentioned, March 13th at Paredes, and you're all welcome to attend if you like. And what I thought would be fun, because I love to read, and I'll read anything, but I do look up Italian American authors and purchase those books either at Barnes & Nobles or Amazon, whatever. But I do enjoy reading, so I thought, let's do a book exchange. So everybody is supposed to bring a book from an Italian American author, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or a cookbook, and then everybody goes home with one. If you brought one, you go home with one. So I thought, what a great idea to introduce people to some new Italian American authors. And just always trying to promote not only females, but Italian Americans. So, to bring it to light.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you. The next series of questions is related to careers and career choices. So I've developed 4 questions which I'd like each of the panelists to consider. The first one is, did you encounter any problems in being a woman, or specifically an Italian American woman, in your field, in your chosen field? The second question, do you feel that there have been advantages to being a woman in your field? Because as there are disadvantages, there are also advantages. Do you feel that you chose your your career specifically because you are a woman? And so we'll start with that. So we'll start with Olympia. Thank you. So did you encounter any problems in being a woman, or you're getting started? You're going to be you're graduating this year, this semester. So did you encounter any problems in
like in my academics?
Yes,
or
in academics, sure.
So as of yet, I haven't encountered any of those problems, thankfully. I'm an English student and minoring in Italian and philosophy, and all 3 of those departments at my university, I attend Loyola University, if that wasn't mentioned previously. They're all dominated by women, which is really nice. So I get to spend a lot of my days going to classes taught by women, hearing women's perspectives on pieces written by men, which really it challenges me and the other people in my class, because the text was written one way and we're interpreting it in 2, 3, 4, 5 completely different ways. So no, I haven't encountered any difficulties, but I feel like being a woman in my field has helped me understand different pieces a lot better.
Thank you. And do you feel you chose your career? Your career choice is law. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel that being a woman has influenced your career choice?
I love to argue. So genuinely, I love to argue, and I feel like I was raised, my parents encouraged me to have a voice. They knew that some women don't get to speak their voice, and they raised me to have a voice and to argue and to be loud and be present. And I feel like that is what encouraged me to go into law.
Good answer, thank you. Lisa,
Yes.
did you encounter any problems in being a woman, or specifically an Italian American woman, and any advantages that you may have found?
Well, I've had 3 careers, let's say. When I was younger, I was a travel agent. And then my most rewarding career was being a mother. So I stayed home with my kids for a lot of years. I have 2 sons. And then my most recent career, I was chief of staff for 2 different City of Chicago aldermen. So the first one I worked for was a woman. She was Irish. And she's one of my best friends, but boy, do we butt heads. So I think, though, a lot of it was being on city council, Chicago City Council as a woman, where it's mostly made up of men. Now things are a little bit different these days, but back then there were very few women on city council. So we, as an Italian American, I didn't have any issues, but as a woman, you know, working with her, I could see there were issues of a woman being on city council. But we plowed through it, and we did a lot of good work for the city. And then I went on to work for a man, the chief of staff for him, and it was a whole different dynamic. But Mary, who I worked for before, was just a very, very hardworking woman, and that's why we worked so well together. Because again, I think that's what a lot of Italian Americans are. I mean, we learned from our parents, our grandparents, whatever, hard work and persevered, and that's how we got where we were today, or where we are today. Just a lot of hard work and proud work. Always do your best, no matter what you're doing.
Right, thank you. Kathy, how about yourself? Did you encounter any problems?
When I first started my professional life, there weren't a lot of women, Italian American women, in my field. I began as a teacher, and there were really very few teachers. As I did administrative work, I noticed that most of the administrative and supervisory positions were filled by men. And very few, if any, Italian American women were at that level. So I saw that there was a bit of a discrepancy as you went up the ladder of professional ladder. There were fewer and fewer women, and in particular, there were fewer, if any, Italian women. And so I did feel that there was a loss in that area. Also, the idea of was there another problem that I saw was in how Italian Americans generally were perceived. And I heard a lot of jokes about Al Capone being in the syndicate, all of these types of things. And eventually I came to the point of realizing that unless we, thank you, Don, unless we took a position like speaking up more, and I just want to stop for a minute. I'm so happy to see, I told Anna this, but I want to say it again. I'm so happy to see Anna actually stepping forward and leading this today. I've crossed paths with Anna so many times, Anna and Dominic, together. They're like this force that comes together in order to do things that are so good for the community. So I'm so happy to see Anna take this very public role. And if I didn't go into teaching and then supervision, subsequently I worked at DePaul University in the education program. If I didn't do that, and really education was a field that was the most open for women, I think I would have gone into law. So I met you, Olympia. I would have gone into law because I really believed that it was a way to right the wrongs that I was seeing, particularly the wrongs associated with my background. You know, in the last several years, we've heard a lot about Black Lives Matter. But when I listened to those arguments, I realized that a lot of the things that were said about Black Lives Matter could also be true of what was said about Italian Americans and other minorities. And so it raised my consciousness. So, thank you. So that if I didn't go into teaching, I would have liked to have gone into law. I find that I'm still kind of involved in this process of trying to set the record straight about my culture. And when I had stopped teaching, I began to write, W-R-I-T-E, the wrongs that I saw. Once again, the wrongs that I'd seen about not having seen Italian American women recognized for their achievements. So.
Thank you, thank you. Christina, in your career, did you encounter any problems in being a woman? Or did you feel that you were given any advantages because you were a woman?
That's a good question. This is my second career, so I'm a professor at Elgin Community College. Before that, I sold real estate, and before that, there was like a litany of other, jobs. And I think that it's sometimes subtle, sometimes less so. In an English department, you have a lot of women. That's the case. But I'm the only Italian American in my department, and I may be the only person in my division. And I think the pushback almost that I get from it is this subtle, maybe being underestimated, or the jokes about the Sopranos, or the are you going to go home and make lasagna tonight? Those sorts of things. And yeah, maybe I am. Maybe you're really astute, but that's not what I'm here. That's not what I'm at school to do, right? That's not a costume that I'm wearing. I'm there to be a professor and to teach English. So I do think it shows up. I think it's shown up all through life, though, and especially if in your school there aren't other Italian American children, you do get things as well there. So you don't take them onto you, but they are happening, and I think the only thing that you can do is to push back and drive the discussion where it needs to go and attend to the things that are being attended to, and then people do learn to, but it does show up. And with academics, it depends where you are. And, at NIU, where I stayed for my master's and my doctorate, we had male professors who were not welcoming, even only 15 years ago, 20 years ago, to women in certain areas of literature. That was a fact. But if you were really good, you could push your way through that. And I think that's what happens a lot. So there's extra pressure that comes because you really have to prove yourself. And for me, my family, I'm the first person who has earned graduate degrees in my family. I came from a family where most of the moms stayed home. The dads were either laborers. My dad was a firefighter. Wonderful people, wonderful things to do, absolutely. But I didn't have a charge or people at home that I could say, okay, how do I go on to graduate school? How do I do this? And if I failed, that would have been okay because it was never in the expectation set. I was born in '66. And so I think that's an internal thing too that you're overcoming as you make your way. Not everything that gets put on you comes from outside. Sometimes it actually comes from inside of you, and those are the things that are more dangerous and that you must speak back to immediately when it's coming from you.
But if it comes from inside, is it something that we've been socialized? So it may have originated outside, and it's a voice that we hear that kind of influences our...
I think it's tandem. We hear some of this from outside society, American society, Anglo society in particular, But some of it can come from your family as well. What are the expectations for you to achieve? Should you pass your brother up in your education, or is that a problem? And then they all get taken into the inside, and it's kind of a soup of these things that you just really have to reflect, and you have to think your way through. Okay, why do I think this? What happened there? And then how do I change that thought process so that I can step out of this and move on to the next thing that I want to do?
I think that's important to recognize it so that you can tackle it.
Absolutely.
Good point. Thank you. Joyce,
Okay.
we're passing the torch on to you. About your career choice as an entertainer, and because you've had many different roles as an entertainer, not just a gold digger, but you've had several that have come after that as well.
Correct, and even before, I just worked as a musician, and I worked in the theater, and I only went to 1 year of college, and then I went to work right away, because I got gigs, jobs, and it was just, at that time, more fun to go to work and sing in bands and things like that. And of course, I just love music. I was the only girl in the adult choir when I was a kid in grammar school, Mary Queen of Heaven in Cicero. And I never, it's interesting because I never thought about being a singer or a dancer. It just kind of happened. I just always loved music and was always involved in music and always singing and dancing school. I was born and raised in Cicero, and I'll say I'm not bragging, because being Italian American, people just thought everybody from Cicero was Italian, which was so not true. We were such a melting pot of different backgrounds. Even in my grammar school, I was one of the few Italians. Everybody else was Polish, German, Irish, Bohemian, Slovakian. So it was really, and then of course I remember when I went away to college, and I went to college in New Mexico, and someone said, I said I was from Cicero. They said, oh my God, your father must be in the mob. I said, no, Al Capone, no. And my father always took great pride in being a very hard-working blue-collar worker. He was a house painter, and he worked really hard. In fact, when I, at one point in my life, needed some money, and I came home and I went to work with my father, and helping his associate assistant as a painter, I realized how hard my father worked. I said, oh my God, Dad, will you forgive me for all the times I aggravated you so much when you came home from work? I just didn't realize how hard he worked. And getting up in the winter time and filling up the van with the paint. And he always said, they always told me I would climb the ladder to success, but they never told me it was to paint the third-story windowsills.
That's great.
And it was really true. And he was an amazing dad. But as for career, I just kind of fell into singing. And also, I don't know, I wanted to was accepted at Goodman Theater. I wanted to go to Goodman Theater, but then I got married at the time. Long story, I was really young, but my mother didn't want me to live in sin, and I was gonna give my father a heart attack because my mother was so upset that I was gonna live in sin, and I said, okay, so we got married. And that marriage didn't work because he was a Vietnam veteran who's still my good friend to this day. And so I've always been very supportive of our veterans too. But as for career, I had moved to California, and I had a roommate at the time, another singer, who she said, oh, come on, there's an audition for the Gold Diggers at NBC. I said, oh, please, I'm not blonde, I'm not tall, I don't wear go-go boots, I'm a jazz singer, Okay, so I went on the audition with her. Long story short is I got the gig and she didn't, and my life changed. Because when you're Italian American, you go to work with Dean Martin, it's like going to work with one of the apostles, I mean, really. And then I went with Sinatra, so it was really, you know, like Gidget went to Hawaii, those movies, well, Joycey went to Monte Carlo and Acapulco, and that just happened to be these great gigs I got from this job. And my life really changed from then, because I was in a whole nother element of performers, and we worked very hard, and we were always taught to look very nice. We were not even allowed to go down through a hotel lobby that we were working unless we were in almost full makeup, because we had to look a certain thing, being a Dean Martin gold digger, you know. So which was okay. You always want to look nice too, but so you know, I kind of got in the habit of always putting makeup on. Now that I'm a little older, I don't even care. Although I did put a little bit on today. But you know, it's kind of interesting. And I look back and I look at all my aunts, my great aunts, my Italian great aunts, and I was so close with so many of them that they didn't wear makeup. Maybe a little bit of black mascara. One of them dyed her hair, Auntie Gracie dyed her hair black till the day she died, you know, but my grandma never dyed her hair. She took pride in having virgin hair, you know, and it's, anyway.
So that goes along with my next question, which has to do with mentoring. What advice do you wish you had received in growing up, and how do you feel that you influence other Italian American women? So both being mentored and then sharing and mentoring others.
Well, I think that has been really an honor for me, because I remember I had a little cousin, my cousin's daughter, who I mentored her, and she became like the first runner-up for the Miss Italian and American something way back in the 70s, you know, and anyone I could mentor. It's just an honor, but I always tell them, get your education. You know, I see these young girls, they want to be singers, but go to school. Get your education. I never finished my education, which I was lucky enough that I had enough piano lessons and things all my life, and the within me, I was able to kind of teach myself a lot of the music. I was able to write music and all that. I just kind of went to my own school and learned how to do it. But that was because I had that type of perseverance, and I had a mother who really drilled in me, work.
So that was your mentoring.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she's still an amazing woman, and 95 years old. I'm her caregiver. I moved back from California. It's going to be 5 years because Mom couldn't live alone anymore. And I have a friend staying with her today because my brother's wife got COVID because her mother's in the nursing home, but everybody got COVID. So I said, don't come over. So our dear friend is there with her now, although she's still amazing at 95. And if you read the Italian Woman book, the article that they allowed me to put in the book was mainly about my mother, because she's the one that really influenced me. She went to work and started her own business at the age of 50. And that's Dolores the florist. I'm her daughter Joyce with the voice. There's a lot of jokes with us. We keep up. And it's just been an honor to be able to be any type of role model I could be for anybody. And you know, life is more than just, sometimes I get shy about the Dean Martin thing, because you know, life is more than just that. If you ask me my favorite woman in the world, I will say the Blessed Mother. If there's anyone I want to emulate ever, it is the Blessed Mother, because she's the one to go to who just gets you through it all. And of course my own mother and all my great aunts, but that's a whole nother question. So
Well, we're celebrating Women's Day, so.
absolutely, and how lucky we are, those of us who are Italian American. I had a really good girlfriend, may she rest in peace, and she died of breast cancer. And anyway, she was only a quarter Italian. Lorraine Pieri was her last name. And she said, always, she said, all you need is a little bit.
It's true.
So when someone tells me, like I asked a gentleman here if he was Italian who's here, he said, no. I said, well, you can't help it. I mean, you can't help it if you're not Italian. And it's great because we are all so important, and where we come from is important, and it's who we are. And but those of us who are Italian are just a little bit extra luck.
Well, I've said it before, it's more than just your DNA. I think it's a state of mind.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and how you know, the culture influences you, even if you're not Italian, so.
Absolutely.
So thank you, thank you. Christina, you touched a little bit about this before, about mentoring and having been mentored and not necessarily having, so could you share your experience with us?
Yeah, I think in being mentored, for me, it's really scattered. I might have taken something from one person and something from another. Oftentimes it was women in my life, but my work ethic comes from my father, who was a firefighter and then did concrete finishing on the side and worked constantly. And my grandfather was a sheet metal worker. So, they influenced me. I'm not finishing concrete, but in, that you get up and you go and you do it. And maybe it's not the thing that you love doing right this minute, but you're working towards that. So I think, there are some male mentors for me that were pretty strong. My great aunts, who didn't speak English and I didn't speak Sicilian, they were still mentors to me in how do you love a person? How do you communicate with a person even without language and make them know that they're valued? And then so I did not start school, I did not start my career or school, and really, the one I'm in now anyway, until I was in my 30s. I had a GED and I decided to go to community college. The ball began rolling there, transferred to State University and, went to 3 more degrees. But I didn't know that was going to happen. But along the way, I did find people, women who mentored me, women who took me aside and said, did you know there's such a thing as a teaching assistant and you could go to graduate school for free if you would sign up for this? Well, if they wouldn't have told me, I wouldn't have known. The other thing that comes into play is that I was a teen parent, so I had my son when I was 16 years old, and you can imagine in an Italian-American family, there are repercussions, but they came together to be supportive, very much so. And because of that, when I was old enough, maybe 30s, before I started going to school, I decided, well, I wanted to help other teen mothers because it's a really precarious place to be. And I started as a mentor for a group it's called Teen Parent Connection now. It was called a Meld for Young Moms then. And every meeting I would be telling these girls, you need to get an education. You have to survive in this world, and you have children, and oftentimes there was not, a lot of support because they were so young from anyone else. And I would drive home thinking, well, you're telling other people to do this and you're not doing it. Where do you really get off? So that's when I decided to go back and I mentored them with all the things we did, diapers and meals, but I also mentored them by walking the walk that I wanted to show to them. And then with my students now, I teach women's literature, among other things, and so especially my women's literature students, they're watching me really closely. And I'm aware of that. So I try to mentor, not just to choose 1 or 2 students here or there, but to kind of behave as an overall mentor and be as good of an example as I can. I teach at a Hispanic serving institution, and there are a lot of similarities in culture. And that can also build trust. It makes it easier for me to mentor than it might someone else. So hoping that I'm just kind of doing it in my daily life.
Thank you, thank you. Kathy, you certainly have a strong mentoring role and have had a strong mentoring role in your campaign against illiteracy. As I mentioned, that as an educator, could you tell us a little bit about how you've been mentored and how you paid it forward?
Well, how I was mentored is very similar to what Tina's talking about. My family really encouraged education. That was going to be my ticket to moving ahead in the world, to get as much of an education as possible. And at the time, you know, my family worked very hard to make sure that I was going to school. And I watched how hard they worked, and also how they, the people that they had around them, people that were from the Italian American community who always helped out. You know, if you didn't have a dress for that dance, suddenly there was a sale somewhere, and it just happened to be your size. So the Italian community as a whole acted as a support group. When I went to school and when I became a teacher, I tried to look for those students who really had no one to call upon. You know, maybe their parents hadn't gone to school, but they had high hopes. And so I tried to help those students who would have been otherwise speechless in that community, and I kept that up in different walks of life. As privately, I have grandchildren now, and I tell them, of course, all these things: hardworking, perseverance, have these important conversations about life. But I try and tell them it's very important to think about things from a lot of different points of view and make good choices. And when you're making good choices, be kind. It's not necessary to step on somebody else for you to move up. And that's a lesson that they're not going to get on social media for the most part, or on the street, because our society has become rather divided and violent in many cases. So I tell them to make good choices and be kind, be safe, and try not to have toxic people or things around you. I oftentimes talk to them about make sure that when you're going out there and dating people that you see the difference between Count Dracula, Prince Charming, and the Cinderella story, because you have to be able to stand on your own. But you know, all this falls to the wayside. I brought something here today because I knew we were going to be talking about women. And I kept thinking, wouldn't it be nice if Franoi had an article about a woman? And then I looked at this issue of Franoi, and here's Mother Cabrini, who starts out with, "I'm a woman, and these are the things I want to see." And so here we are, 7 decades later, talking about Mother Cabrini. There's a major film coming out talking about her humanitarian efforts to help everybody, no matter what side of the tracks, what color, but going back to this idea of we're all connected. And certainly such a strong message coming out of COVID, right?
Thank you, thank you. Lisa, so you must certainly have a mentoring role being in part of the women's division of the JCCIA, and you most possibly have been mentored yourself. So could you speak a little bit about that?
So, real quick, I would just say, in my lifetime, it was my Nona that I was most mentored by. From an early age, you know, I kind of hung with her. I was the granddaughter out of all the cousins and whatnot. But even just like going to the cemetery and scrubbing the grave of my grandfather, she came here, and my grandmother had 5 sons, and her husband died. My grandfather died at 43 years old. Mm-hmm. So she never remarried, so she worked so hard her whole life, and you know, that seems to be the common denominator amongst all of us, right? Hard work, right? And perseverance. So you've seen that, you've lived that. So she would have been my biggest mentor. But they say there's a friend or a person for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So I've had many other mentors, you know, depending on the situation in my life during that. But as far as mentoring people, You know, like even Diana Falco, who's here today, she's younger than me, but she has mentored me as much as I think I have mentored her. You know, we always talk about great ideas. When I started Italian American Heritage Month, which was during COVID, and we weren't having the parade. I was vice president at the time under Sergio Grande and Gian Grande, and so I'm like, Sergio, what are we gonna do? I go, what if we do Italian American Heritage Month? You know, and a lot of people honestly didn't even know we had October was an Italian American Heritage Month. So started with that, doing something every day of the month. And Frank was kind enough to do a podcast. We had Lynn Scalaro did an Italian lesson. Every day of the month we honored an Italian American and we did an event. And Diana came up with Tombola. Let's do a Tombola thing. Or was that may have been the second year or something. But anyway, just so knowing people along the way and just talking your ideas out and whatnot. So like I said, there's been mentoring back and forth. But I did have in city council when I was working there, excuse me, I had run the internship program. So each city of Chicago alderman, 50 of them, each got an intern. So I was in charge of putting together this entire program and putting pieces together of what to show these young interns. And I got them in places that even my boss was like, I've never even been there, you know, how did you do that, you know? So it was a lot of fun. They were pretty engaged, and again, just telling them, as I tell my own children, try anything once, as long as you're not hurting yourself or somebody, but there's so much in this world to explore, and as was mentioned again, always be humble and kind. And that is going to be the song. I'm gonna dance with at my son's wedding in June, Tim McGraw, he has a song, Always Be Humble and Kind, and that's gonna be my mother and son dance, because that's how I told my kids to
Sweet.
always do that.
Thank you, thank you. Olympia, you're Miss Italia America. Could you tell us a little bit about the contest and why you decided to compete for the pageant, and how do you find yourself in that role, and how do you find yourself influencing other women, young women like yourself?
So Miss Italia America is a branch of the Miss Italia pageant. Miss Italia obviously was founded in Italy by Mr. Modigliani, I don't remember how many years ago. It's like escaping me right now. And this little offshoot, Miss Italia America, was brought back in 2023. I'm the first winner in about now it's 16 years. It had closed, unfortunately, but I'm very grateful they brought it back. I decided to do the pageant because I had done the women's division pageant, the Columbus Day pageant, 2 times, and I had a rather fun experience, and I wanted to do one more pageant that would allow me to express who I am as not only an Italian American, but also as an Italian, because that pageant was all in Italian, and it was a lot of fun being able to speak Italian and show off who I am as a person. As for how I feel representing as Miss Italia, or as Miss Italia America, I think of these 2 little girls, Valentina and Daniela, who our brothers played baseball together. They like grew up watching me grow up, and I grew up watching them grow up. And I think after I won, it was like a few weeks later, I had seen Daniela, the older one, and she went, I can't believe you won. I'm so happy you won. I look up to you, like she said it. And in that moment, I was so taken aback because I had watched her from when she was 3 years old to now she's about to graduate high school. She's 18. And it was just like a very real, or a moment where I realized like, oh, like I've influenced this little girl. Like she looks up to me. She watched me graduate high school, or graduate 8th grade, graduate high school. I'm about to graduate college, and like she watched every step and she took it in, and she asked me questions here and there, and she's building her own career, and I told her that when she turns 18, she should compete as well for Miss Italia America. And so it was really, really nice to be able to say that. like she looks up to me, yeah.
And that was something that Christina had brought up, that we're on all the time, and they're watching us, even when we don't think that we're not doing it with intention. They are watching us to either emulate us or take lessons from us. So it's important that we put our best, face on and be good role models. What advice do you wish you had growing up?
This isn't a piece of advice that I wish I had, it's a piece of advice that I wish I would have taken. Don't be anxious, everything will work out. My parents have said that to me from the day I was born. Don't be anxious, everything's gonna turn out fine. You'll be all right. And I never took it until, I wanna say, a few months ago, when I started applying to law school. I was like, okay, everything will work out no matter what. Everything has worked out before, everything will work out. Don't be anxious, it'll all work out.
Good advice, good advice. Lisa, how about yourself?
I looked at that question and I just, I don't really know the answer to it, to be honest with you. My parents, they raised 4 wonderful children. We're all successful in our own right. And maybe the push on education a little bit more, but it was important for the boys, in the family to carry on. Of course, they're named after, I have so many Anthony's and Joe's and Aldo's in my family. But the girls, it's like, oh, well, let's name her this. But I think just my parents, just worked hard, and my mother did stay home with us, and she was always encouraging. But I always go back to just always be kind, and I wasn't always kind, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I wasn't always kind, and I wish that was pushed on me a little bit more.
That's very good advice, yeah.
Yeah, because, the world is very small, as we all know, right? And you always run into somebody later in life, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I did that to you, or whatever it was, years later. It's a small world, right? Piccolo mondo, right?
And you never know when you're going to be in that position yourself.
Right.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Kathy, how about yourself?
I think the advice that I got from my parents, although they did not know much about the how to go about things in America, they were very loving and trusting people, and they were my source. I believed in them. When they told me something, I would follow that course of action, even if what I saw on the street was quite different from what I was learning at home. So I think the advice that I give my own grandchildren is this. I say, look, be yourself. Know the difference between right and wrong. Don't be swayed by a crowd. Look to the people who love you. This is the advice that I got from my parents, and it's the advice that I pass on. Today we have cell phones, and I see that so often young people go to the cell phones before they answer a question or when they have a few minutes free. And the cell phones are good. There are a lot of pros to them, but there's a lot that comes from the cell phone that can be used in a negative way. And I go back to that position. Be yourself. You know what's right and wrong. Trust yourself. Be yourself, because everybody else is taken. Follow what you believe. Listen to the people who love you. And also have those people who dug deep in their pockets to provide for you. So take your lessons from the home front rather than the street side. And certainly rather than a lot of the popular culture you may be hearing on a cell phone.
Thank you. Christina, you may have touched on this in your own talk. Could you?
Lessons. I think I'm learning them now. I think sometimes it takes a while, and you think back and you remember someone said something to you, someone modeled something for you, but you weren't quite ready. at the time to take that on. My grandpa had a nickname for me, and it's not going to be said right because I'm going to say it the way he said it here, Gabarosto. So, you know, I have a tendency to hard-headedness, and I inherited that, so it's not like I invented it. But I think sometimes, you know, it's a good thing we have memories, and we can kind of look back. My parents, and I think their generation sometimes, struggled with how permissive they were going to be and how strict they were going to be, because the generation, my mom was born in 44, my dad, or 46, my dad was born in 44. Their parents were strict. Their parents would say, you're not going out like that. You're not going there. You don't do sleepovers. My parents wanted to be more in the times, right? But they didn't know how to do that, so they kind of abdicated in some ways, and they thought things would take care of themselves. And there was some good advice that would have come from the older generation that said, don't do this. This is dangerous. No, you're not. Now, they weren't incredibly permissive. They were pretty strict, my parents, but they didn't. I think the advice that would have helped me was kind of this self-protection. How do you protect yourself in this world? I think there's a lot of wisdom within the culture about what happens there. And then the other piece was, I was struck when Olivia was speaking about her parents encouraging her to argue and her love of argument. And I think that is active advice, right? And I think just in my generation, that the argument was perhaps not encouraged. There were things that were the way they were, and because I said so was often the response. And it's not in any way to say that my parents made mistakes. They worked with what they had, but now as an adult I can go and see, well, what were their difficulties as parents in providing advice in this world that was half this cultural bit and half something else, and not knowing, and maybe even waffling back and forth on what their stance was going to be about something. So that was a big psychological study on my parents. Glad they're not here today. All right.
So that was one of our questions here today. Was there a clash between your family values and those of your peers? And so you've answered that for us. Joyce, how about yourself? Any advice? And was there maybe any clash between your family values and you know, this American society that we find ourselves in as Italian Americans?
Well, as Italian American, most of my advice from my family was always universal.
Good.
Maybe that was their being Italian, they just were universal type people. I was just raised to be nice to everybody, basically. And my father would always say to me, like, if there was someone that didn't like you or you didn't like, you say hello and you say goodbye. You always be polite. So I was taught to always be polite. And I had a great aunt on my father's side of the family, Aunt Fran, and she would always say, when I would have either a failed marriage or something, she would say, what's meant for you won't miss you. If I was looking for that next, you know, perfect husband, no such thing. But she always say, what's meant for you won't miss you. And I love that, sticks with me. And everything I do and think about, what's meant for you won't miss you. In other words, trust. It's trust in God. I'm so grateful for my Catholic education. Not that I'm a very good Catholic. I'm a cafeteria Catholic. That means I kind of pick and choose. The priests don't like that, but whatever. It doesn't stop me. When I want to go to Mass, I go to Mass. And I do love Jesus. Although I love Judaism. I ended up married, my last husband was Jewish, and which was okay in my family. You know, they didn't have animosity with that in any way. I never had a problem with that. So I was always taught to accept everybody, whoever they are, and even I had black friends when I was a young girl. Being from Cicero wasn't easy, when I went away to college and I was in the music field too, I would meet black people. They would say, "Where are you from?" I would say, "Oak Park." Because I was afraid if I told them, the black people, if I told them I was from Cicero, that they would think, "Oh my God, she's prejudiced. You know, she hates black people." And anyway, but I was just, so as a result, I pretty much love everybody. I might not like everybody or everything they do, but I do love all people and all types of people. I don't care where you're from. You know, I just pray for peace in our world, and I think being Italian American gave me that foundation of love and caring. Even my great uncles, great aunts, and my aunts today, I don't have many left, but all my cousins, we were all raised so close, and I'm so lucky to have many first cousins, and we still are close. And that's amazing. That's because we grew up together. I feel badly that my son, because I raised him in California, I would bring him back here to get to know his cousins and things, but it's not the same. So that generation, I wish my son would have had the foundation of being raised here with his Italian American family all the time. But I didn't want to take him away. I didn't want to have to put him on a plane to come and visit his family in California. So anyway, I stayed in California 45 years.
Wow.
Until I moved back here 5 years ago. So that's kind of home to me too still. Although if you say home, I say Chicago. But nowadays I think, oh my God, I was in California more than I was ever in Chicago. And I do love California, although I don't miss it really, because I'm a be where you are now person. So I don't remember who gave me that advice or if I just picked it up along the way. And that's really, really important advice, I think, is to just be where you are now. Be in the moment. And live the moment. And be with who you're with and pay attention to them. And give them the opportunity to pay attention to you. It's almost like I had to learn to accept compliments. There was a time when I would get compliments. Oh, you're this, you're oh, and I would get really embarrassed. And I've learned to say, well, thank you. And that was really hard for me. When people would say, oh, you're so good, oh, you're pretty, or you're this. I just learned to humbly say thank you.
Do you think that was because you're being a woman, or is it just?
I think it was being a woman and also being in the showbiz spotlight that made it more, it made it more difficult for me, you know. And I, like I said, I learned to just be humble and accept it and say thank you. You know, and advice I got once from a wonderful Irish priest, who's still a good friend of mine to this day, he's my mother's age, in California. He said, give to the giver the gift of receiving. So when someone gives you a compliment, give them the gift of accepting it. Give to the giver the gift of receiving. And that still lives with me today.
Good advice. Thank you. Thank you. Christina did talk about this. How about Kathy? Was there a clash between your family values and those of your peers growing up? Italian American woman.
Yeah,
Compounded.
I did see at times, you know, I would say, why can't I do that?
Mm.
Other kids are doing it, why can't I do it? Well, you know, the answer was, they're not your parents.
It's their house.
Yeah. So I did see a clash at times between lessons I was learning at home and what I was seeing on the street. But even though, and Joyce brought this up, you know, there was something about this idea of being respectful. Even if, love everybody, even if you don't like them. There's a lot of truth to that. Be respectful of people, even if you weren't following along with what they said. And in terms of my parents, I certainly respected what they had to say to me, because I saw how hard my family worked and how hard my grandparents worked. So I trusted my source. When they said something to me, I thought about it, but I went about it in my own way and generally followed along their lines. Some people said to me, "You've been programmed." That's what they said.
Mhm.
"You've been programmed by your parents. You've been programmed by your culture." I wondered what they were programmed by. You know, in a sense, there's a lot of advice going around in my home, but the final decision was mine. And this is what I emphasize with young people, even my own family. As I said before, I tell my grandchildren, make good choices, consider it from a lot of points of view, be kind and respectful, and then act. And like I say, I think that's a pretty good skill in dealing with people from all different cultures.
Thank you, thank you. Lisa, how about yourself? First of all, first, second, this is something we haven't even talked about on our panel today. We all talked about where our family's from, but I think being first or second or even third generation Italian American plays a role in dealing with this culture clash that we're talking about today. So maybe that's something that you can address in your
Sure.
response.
As I mentioned earlier, my father is from Sicily. My mother is actually not Italian, but everybody always thought she was, because she has dark hair, big brown eyes, dark skinned. So everybody always just assumed she was. We moved, I was born on the northwest side of Chicago and still live there. Not with my mom, although she's still there. But there were very few Italians. I remember growing up. We had a lot of Irish families. Lived in Edison Park. So, the people across the street had 9 kids. The people down the street had 8 kids, There were 4 in my family, and I know a lot of Italian families had a lot of large families, but my father was strict. We didn't get to do the sleepovers, as one of you ladies had mentioned.
Right. Me neither.
Right, we didn't get to have birthday parties with our friends, inviting them all over. It was just a little bit different. And then when you go to someone's house, if you did, like you had a best girlfriend and you were invited down the street, what they ate, of course, was different than what we ate for the most part. But my father was very strict. I could tell you, I have never seen The Godfather. He didn't allow us to watch it when it came out. I'm probably the only person in the world who has ever seen The Godfather. And with that, I've never seen The Sopranos. I've never seen any of those shows. You couldn't even name them, because I wouldn't even know what you're talking about. Anything derogatory. And I'd love to give a shout out to the Italian American Humans Relation Foundation, because they are against all those stereotyping films and derogatory things toward Italians. So when something happens or they see something, they will call upon that person and call them out, whether it's a large manufacturing company or a billboard or whatever. So that organization is on top of it. So I'm very proud to be associated with them in that respect. But yeah, like I said, I never got to watch that. And in respect to my father, I've never seen it to this day. One time I was in high school and I was working part-time after high school, and I would tell you if I remembered, but I think I came home late. I don't remember what I did, but I got grounded. I had to call into work grounded. He would not even let me go to work. You go to school, you come home, and you go to your room. So for a week, I couldn't even work my job. So, yeah, so that's kind
It's
of
an
my...
interesting story.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. And choosing my panel, I wanted a nice balance or range of generations presented, and so that was one of the reasons I invited you here. You give a different voice to this, especially this cultural clash that we may have found, and I think it's generational, and it's also where we are in our immigration, first, second, or third generation. So maybe that's something that you can address in your experience. Was there a cultural clash and talking about a permissive or a strict father, which Yeah, my father was strict, but I loved him and I idolized my father. So
Same here.
Thank you.
So my father was born in Italy and moved to the United States when he was 18 years old. And my mother was born here, but her parents moved to America like right before she was born as well, so in 1972. So I'm second generation on my mom's side, but I'm first generation on my dad's side. And I would say that both of them are a little strict, but not in a bad way. It was more for mine and my brother's protection. I also have never ever had a sleepover, which I don't mind. I like sleeping in my own bed. And when I could say my first moment of like culture clash was when I went over to my friend Melissa's house, and she said her mom was making spaghetti. Okay, your mom's making spaghetti. I didn't expect it to be like the way my mom makes it, but she served SpaghettiOs, and I had never seen SpaghettiOs before. And I remember I was in 3rd grade, and I looked at the bowl in front of me. We weren't sitting at the table either, we were sitting on the couch. And I looked at the bowl in front of me, and I went, I gotta finish this. And that was the first and only time I'd ever eaten SpaghettiOs. But I would say for culture clash, like everyone else on the panel has been saying, my parents, or not culture clash, cultural values. My parents are also very hardworking. They both have worked for everything they have. My father inspires me every day to like pursue my education. He's the first person in his family to receive a bachelor's degree. And on my mom's side, in May, I will be the first person to receive a bachelor's degree. So I carry that with me. I carry their hard work with me. But I noticed a lot in high school that a lot of my peers whose parents had degrees, advanced degrees, they didn't work half as hard as I did. I attended St. Viator High School in Arlington Heights. I was born and raised in Norwich. I grew up there. So I took the train for freshman and sophomore year to high school, and then I drove junior and senior year. And so I sacrificed, I guess, to go to high school, whereas my peers didn't. Their parents would drop them off at school. My mom would drop me off at the train and then pick me up from the train. So I worked hard to make sure that my grades were so high so that my parents saw that I cared about what they did, or about the efforts they put into sending me to St. Viator. But a lot of my peers just didn't put in that same amount of work. And I even see it now in university. I don't have to pay for my entire college fund, but I have to pay a little bit. And I see myself working harder than a lot of my peers whose parents set up that college fund a long time ago, and they don't have to pay for their own way. So that hard work, that's something that I've noticed a difference between like Italian and Italian American people versus, I don't want to say everyone else, but everyone else.
Thank you. We talked about fathers a lot and being permissive or protective or strict, and we talked about women mentoring us, and some of us may have talked about this. Our fathers played an important role in shaping who we are, and mentorship too. I know I felt it in my own growing up. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and how our fathers mentored us, or how they were important to us in our development.
So my father is probably one of my best friends. I'm lucky enough for both parents, to be very, very close with both of my parents. But my father is definitely one of my best friends. One time I was taking the Myers-Briggs personality test just on a whim, and he happened to be taking it for work. And we found out that we have the same personality type. And we're both ENTJ. Which is really rare. It's only about 2% of the population has that personality type. And the fact that both of us have it, I'm like, not only am I his twin like in looks, but I'm also his twin personality type, I guess. But he's definitely influenced me a lot. He encourages me all the time to be the best version of myself, the strongest version of myself, the most caring version of myself. So yeah.
Well said, thank you, thank you. Lisa, about yourself, about the role that your father played in mentoring you.
So he was one who had a kind of a motto, he who travels alone travels fastest. You know, he didn't come home with a big group of friends and whatnot, worked very hard. But I do remember one story, as I became a travel agent, and I wanted him to take my mother on I wanted my dad to travel. We never traveled as children. We went to Ohio, that's where my mother originally was from, but we never took vacations, you know, they were always working, whatever, so we didn't have these big trips going to Florida or Wisconsin Dells or back to Italy or anything like that. But I wanted him to take my mother on this cruise. I was planning this group cruise, and he's like, I'm not going on any boat. I'm like, come on, Dad, you know, take Mom. How do you know? You might like it. He says, how the hell do you think I got here? And that was that. It was like, end of subject, you know? I'm like, oh, he does know. And it reminded me of what a probably horrible and rough journey he had as a young child, or, you know, a young teenager, whatever, to come over on that crossing. And he, you know, he was, I don't want to say stubborn, but, you know, it was kind of his way or not. And I lost him 2 years ago. He was 91, and we got really, really close as we got older, because I understood more. I understood about how he raised me, and the things that I couldn't do, as we all mentioned, and the hard work and everything. And so, yeah, I miss him dearly.
There are things you don't see in the moment that you
Exactly.
draw later in life.
When you don't have it, how much you miss it and realize.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you. Kathy.
My dad was always in the background, so to speak, but somehow things got done. You know, he was the guy that got along with everybody, worked several jobs. My mother was the one who laid the law down in our house, but my father always found a way to make everything work. And I think that he had a very low-key way of talking to people. He's everybody's friend, and very accomplished person. So, to this day, oftentimes I'll be talking to somebody and I'll say, you know, it's too bad that you never met my dad, because he was a wonderful person.
Yeah.
My dad was 22 when I was born. My mom was 20. My dad had just gotten back from Vietnam. He's 79 now, and he's just now getting VA disability for post-traumatic stress. So he was carrying that with him. He was 17 when he enlisted. He was search and destroy infantry, and I was born in Quantico. So my dad, he's a quiet person. I'm not going to say he's a gentle person, but he's a quiet person. And when he would come home from work, we would all be playing in the front yard neighborhood. You know, my dad would pull up. The woman who was drinking coffee with my mother would leave the house and go back to her house. The kids would scatter. My dad looked like he was angry, and my husband's laughing because my dad is like a gentle giant to him. But this was, you know, in 1972. And, you know, he was carrying a lot, and he looked like he was carrying a lot. And I want to be honest about what that was like. Now, as we're older, my mother has had a stroke. I'm driving my dad to his VA appointments, and there are many of them. And we sit in the car together, and there's just such peace between us. If I'm in a kitchen with my mother, you know, there's a lot of talking, there might be some arguing, but when I'm with my dad, we can just be there. And what I've come to realize is that and I said not a gentle person, but there actually is a gentle person there. And the older he gets, I think the more I get to know him because he's not tasked with the responsibility of raising me anymore. He can just be my dad in the car, riding with me, and we're not on equal terms. He's still my dad, and I still listen to him. But we're two adults there, and I think we're very glad for that. My mother will say, and she'll often raise her hand like this and go, when I say something, you're his. And that means that she doesn't think I'm anything like her, and that I really am my dad, right? I'm in the flesh, I'm the female version of this man. And I think she's right, in a lot of ways. I've had different experiences, so I've come out the squeezer in a different shape, but I am very much him. So they're both dear to me, but the father-daughter relationship is such a mysterious thing. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I do have a great father. He lived to be 93, and I became very close with him when I was a teenager. He got me through some very difficult times in my life at that time. And my dad, it's interesting because I mentioned that I had married, my son's father was Jewish, and when I was going to marry his father, his name was Seth. When I was going to marry Seth, he wanted me to sign a prenup, okay? And I thought, prenup, oh my God, get an attorney, get a this. By the way, if I ever had a career choice again, I would become an attorney. That's the only thing I always say. I would become an attorney. Absolutely. I've learned a lot. And I've advised people, oh, my attorney told me this, so this, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my father said to me, Joycey, of course, you love him, he loves you, so sign it. Big deal. Trust. Anyway, and which was the best advice for me because I was really fretting over this. I was in California, didn't have anyone that had ever been through this except the people who read about in the paper, the Hollywood people that go to this. I ended up going to one of those attorneys that one of those did Hollywood prenup type things. And, I just went through it and I learned a lot and I signed it and the marriage didn't work. But anyway, I got what I got. And he took care of my son, which is the most important. I'm still on okay terms with him now. Better terms with my Vietnam first husband. Because my father, back to my father, he was in World War II, but he got pneumonia right before they were going to send him to the Battle of Atout. I think it was in France, Atout. Anyway, so he didn't have to go. He went to Alaska and worked the kitchen. But my dad, with every surgery he had, he would be at Heinz. He was more at home with his Army buddies than anybody else. Oh yes, his Knights of Columbus buddies. I'm a Knights of Columbus brat, I always say, because I was raised with the Knights of Columbus and the Women's Auxiliary. And anyway, but my dad just loved being a veteran, loved his Army buddies. Loved his, so whenever I think, oh, Joycey sing, I was always singing to his roommate their favorite song, and I was often going to Heinz to entertain the patients and the guys when I was there, and women, some women veterans too. We can't forget that women serve too. That's another thing. I always think I would have become an attorney, but I almost wished, who wants to go to war? But I feel like I wished I would have joined a service. I have one girlfriend that I went to high school with that joined the Navy, and she's the only one I keep saying, we got to get you on. I don't think other people know that you joined the Navy out of our group, 1970 graduate. High school is gone now, Immaculate Heart of Mary. But that's another really admirable choice to make, and you just learn things in the service that you don't learn in real life. I don't wish my son would have gone, but I think he could have used that. Although he's doing well, very successful, but anyway, life is short. He says I brainwashed him because I raised him Catholic, I said, well, your father wasn't Jewish enough to want to raise you Jewish, and he didn't really care. He didn't care until I wanted to baptize him. And that became a whole other story. But eventually, I did baptize him. I was only allowed to have certain people at the baptism. But anyway, it all worked out, you know. It's funny how things, we stress on them being so important at the time. And then you think about it later and you think, really, why did I stress about that? I guess that's why they say live and learn.
That's
I
good
don't know.
advice too, thank you. So we talked about our fathers and our development and how much they've made us who we are today as women. You know, they play very important roles. I'm gathering from all of us in our talks. So probably the buddy question to that, and probably one of the most controversial questions on my list of questions is, it's here. Why am I not seeing? Are we our own worst enemies as women? And do we sometimes conflict and undermine our efforts? You know, do we get in each other's way? And so you kind of touched upon that a little bit. You know, you were on the same road and both very strong, you know, women and worked well together, but are we our own worst enemies sometimes, and maybe in experiences that we've had with that, and this may be pertinent to some of us. And so,
Well, personally, I think in the past, I think this battery's dead.
uh-oh.
In the past, yes, that was the case with me. I was my own worst enemy many times, always doubting myself and questioning myself. But now that I've kind of grown up in a different way, more mature, I'm 71 years old, I don't let those things bother me anymore. So I'm not my worst enemy anymore. I kind of know. Maybe that's one good thing about age. Maybe that's one thing, I guess my great aunts taught me, but not that they said that to me. You know, you just really learn once you get older, and you hopefully have the wisdom to question yourself and question things, and not hate people for those things that they did that we wish they would have done differently or instilled in us differently. It's all about forgiveness too. I think forgiveness is like something we just have to really master.
It's important to move on with that, yeah. Were you ever in a situation in which another woman clashed and you found that, you know, they were undermining your efforts, or?
Yes, I have in many ways, but that's when my father's advice kicks in. Just,
Let
you
it
know,
go.
you're right. Just, you know, be kind and move on. I worked with 6 women, and people would always say there had to be a lot of jealousy, but you know, we were 6 women, the gold digger group I worked with. I was the second kind of group. I was in the group that went to Vietnam. They were a little bit older, the original gold diggers, but we were 6 girls, and we would gather and pray before every show. We would hold hands and pray, and we just respected each other. And maybe one was a little more, she was taller too, and she was always trying to take over the stage with her big movements, and we would just try to tell them, calm her down. But we just had this beautiful love and forgiveness of each other, of who we were, and we knew that Maria was just that way, trying to take over the stage, you know. In fact, anyway, so yeah,
accepting
very
each other,
accepting. And as a result, fortunately, I don't suffer from jealousy, because that is something that a lot of people suffer from. And it's because I am who I am, like Popeye. I am who I am. And it, you know, just have to, que sera, sera.
I like the idea of communal prayer beforehand and joining hands and
Absolutely, and
one,
that
becoming
kept
one.
us from, you know, being, having animosity with each other,
right.
and who was a better singer, who got a better review, who got a this. We didn't pay attention to those things, at least I didn't.
Sure.
And we were And to this day, we're all very good friends. We've seen each other's children grow up, and to this day, I'm kind of the only one that continues to work, although the pandemic, since I moved back here, has kind of forced me into retirement, because I spent the last 20 years singing in the senior living centers, because there was more work than the jazz clubs. I don't want to go back to the clubs, been there, done that. So I worked in the senior living centers for the past 20 years, and with the pandemic, I just really didn't want to go into seniors centers and work, and but as a result, I just am fortunate when someone else is successful. I'm happier for them. If there's another woman that gets this gig or gets a that, I'm just really happy for them. And to me, I don't care if they're Italian or Irish or Jewish or whatever. It's about them being successful. Go for it.
Moving forward together. I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Christina, about yourself, have you?
Yeah, I don't know that I was ever my worst enemy. I mean, I made mistakes for sure, things I would do differently with wisdom of age on me. But I think there's a difference between not being your worst enemy, but actually being your own friend. And those are two different things, and that's an action that you have to take. And I think it comes at a certain age, maybe not just for women, I think for humans, that we actively befriend ourselves. We finally figure out, like, this me is never going to change, so I better learn to like it, and I better take care of it, right? I better do the things that a friend would do for this person that is me. So I would say a befriending needs to take place, and is very important. As far as other women, again, I'm going to go back to, I don't think there's a huge difference. I think people can get in your way, whether they're male or female, right? And sometimes it may seem more hurtful to us as women that this other woman wants to get the same thing that I want to get, or she's not supporting me. And I think because there is an underlying sisterhood, we hunger for that support. It's the mother, in a way, right? That we're hungering for that continued support of our mother through the other women in our lives. If we want that, we have to be really specific and intentional about creating it ourselves with the women that we call our friends, with women that we've just met, but how do we do that? Over the last 2 years, we had a hard time, and my daughter passed away. I have 4 children. My daughter passed away, and I can tell you that my women friends have kept me alive. They've checked on me. They've sat with me. They've shared their own happenings with me, things that have happened afterwards. We think that when we're in our teens and 20s, that's the time that we have the most friends, and friends are most important. And then we have our families, or we have this other part of our life, our careers, and friends will never be as important again. But I think that actually, midlife and beyond, your friends are exceptionally important, and you're exceptionally important to them. So, if we're talking about Women's Day, I think it's about being cognizant. Someone was talking about being in the moment as well, and looking at the person across from you and thinking, what's the kind gesture, what's the connection I can make there? Because, left to our own devices, that may not happen naturally, but we have to do that, and it can be not just important, it can be critical in people's lives.
Thank you. Kathy.
About being your own worst enemy. I haven't always been right. I've made my mistakes. But if I haven't always been confident, my doubts, and in order to combat that, I would try and be prepared, research, etc., And that goes back to my upbringing, I believe, because I was always taught to do my best. If there's not a way, you make a way. And that was this entrepreneurial kind of independence, so to speak. Oftentimes in getting certain jobs, competing for certain jobs, being in certain programs, I have to say that I have been undermined by both men and women competing for that same job. I have tried to take the advice of my father, which was respect everybody, get along with them from 9 to 5. That person that you know is undermining you because somebody just told you that that person's undermining you, or they want the same position. Feel a sense of compassion, but do your best. And don't create a work environment, again, that's toxic by undermining them. And that's how I have learned to be my own best friend, to accept myself. You know, there's this love yourself. Stand on your own before you can lean on somebody else. So I followed that philosophy in kind of adopting a way to advocate for myself.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa?
Yeah, I probably am my own worst enemy. This friend of mine said to me once, he's Irish, and something happened. He said, "Oh, Lisa, you know the Irish don't forgive." And I said, or he said they don't forget. And I said, "Well, I'm Sicilian. We don't forgive," you know. And so that was kind of my motto, you know. Like if you did something wrong to me, it's like I'm done with you, you know. And that was wrong, and that's why I mentioned earlier about always being kind and, you know, trust God, whatever, and just move on with it. But I'll admit, I have done that. It's like, you're dead to me, you know? So I have to get over that. And I mean, I have as I've gotten older, but.
Something we all work at.
Yeah, something I will continue to work at.
Thank you.
Life's too short.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Olympia?
I would have to agree with everyone else on the panel. Sometimes, yeah, we are our own worst enemies. I think for me personally, anxiety gets in the way of a lot of things, which is going back to that advice I wish I would have taken from my parents, is like, don't be anxious, everything will work out. So there have been missed opportunities because I've gotten stressed over it, or I like have limited myself because, oh, I don't think I can do it. But like I think it was you, Joyce, that was saying, just trust that it'll all work out. And it always ends up working out. But I think the question you had asked earlier also was, do you like
Your
clash
peers,
with
yes,
your peers?
yes.
Yeah, unfortunately. Academically, like I said, I'm my father's daughter. I'm like his twin. So I've developed that god-awful competition and competitiveness. But I don't ever let that stand in the way of uplifting and supporting other women, or other people in general, not just other women. But within my field, within my like studies, I've had to fight for different academic internships, and other people have received them over me because they've been more qualified. But like for the internship I have right now, I work as a program assistant for the Italian program at Loyola, and it was between me and one other girl, and she started trying to tear me down to our professor over it, and my professor took us both at face value, or not at face value, but like from our character, and she chose me over her because of character, because I didn't care if I got it or she got it. I wanted, at the end of the day, for both of us to end up happy. So yeah, sometimes we women who aren't as confident or aren't as secure in themselves do tear each other down, and that's a really sad reality. But it is a reality, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. That's a good point. We'd like to open up the questions to the audience now for our panel. So these are questions that we may not have been prepared for, but any questions from the audience? Pam?
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. This is great that you came, that everyone came today to talk about Italian-American women. My question is I'm thinking about the next generation. And I have 2 kids. They're 25 and 31. I've taken them to Italy. I've brought them here for Italian-American summer camp, learn a little Italian. And I've tried to do, I've had a La Befana party. I didn't grow up with the La Befana tradition because we're a Sicilian family, but, my grandmother never celebrated it, but I learned about it and I wanted to immerse my children in Italian culture, so we had a La Befana party every January 6th. But going forward, I don't see my kids coming to Casa Italia. I'd love to have them come here more. I'd love them to be more immersed in Italian culture. I think I have done a good job immersing Italian values in them, but just curious about your thoughts about the next generation, because frankly, if you look around, it's kind of all adults that come here. It's not a lot of kids that come here. And just trying to nurture the Italian culture in the next generation. And you don't all have to answer, but just if anyone has any particular thoughts about that.
Well, I have 2 sons myself. One is 29 and one is 26.
How can you be that old?
Or 27. I think he just turned 27 last month. So I have tried that myself and had our own traditions that I brought that I didn't grow up with. Like La Befana is one of them. They always get a gift, I keep the tree up. I have a broom under the tree and they always get a gift on the Epiphany. Just little traditions. They took Italian in high school, but trying to get them to come to events. Almost begging them, come on, just come with me, like today or something. And you're right, it's very difficult. There is the Avante group, which is a young group through the JCCIA that they're trying to establish. And they do have a big following. I'm not sure exactly what they're working on currently, but I know they have a spring outing coming up or something like that. But that may be one thing to get them involved. I've asked my kids to go to there. I have 2 nieces, they've gone to that. But it's tough, it is, to try and see what they want or what they're doing with their lives. And you could probably answer it even better, but trying to get their peers, involved with them. I think if they always bring along a friend, it helps too.
I would have to agree with that. I try to get involved as much as I can. I've gone to a few of the Avanti events, like you mentioned, and just bringing another person with. So I know for you, it would be just suggesting it to your sons or suggesting it to your children to attend these events. They're honestly a lot of fun, and it's a lot of networking too at those events. But I would say for the different cultural events that we have, just bringing your sons, and then trying to introduce them to other people their age, because that's how we keep these things alive. I know that it's difficult, it really is, because sometimes it's really intimidating to have your mom drag you to this event that you don't want to go to, but you gotta go to it. And then she pushes you in front of somebody who she thinks is your age, and you gotta talk to them for a little bit. But honestly, that's how some of the best and deepest connections are made. So I would say just continue to drag them along.
Thank you. Oh, yes, please.
And to add, it was an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. I think it's important for people your age, my age, to write a lot of the traditions and memories that we have. What I learned recently, I got together with a second cousin of mine who's 40 years old, and she lost her dad 2 years ago, and she's a second, third generation. And she's just now understanding and appreciating the culture and the history of her family and just Italian culture in general. And she was craving to know more from me, and then I realized I didn't have all the answers. You know, I had some answers, but not all of them. And I think they need to mature in order to appreciate what we have to give and what the history of the culture has. And so I think it's great that you wrote that book. I wrote it down. I would love to read it. And just sharing those. A few years ago, I'm with Olympia, by the way, and a few years ago, she came across a book, and I was like, that's great, and it was, I can't remember the name of it, but it had to do with,
I don't remember the name of it either, but I know what book you're talking about.
And it was like, oh my God, this is like my mother. Mm-hmm. Oh, it had to do with how, proverbs and just customs of, by cooking, it's just crazy things that grandmothers and mothers, my mother did, like believing in superstitious stuff that came into some everyday thing. But I thought how great that she found that book, and I can share it, and I can honestly say to her, oh, you know what, my mother did that. When I was little, my mother, you know, in a small town, they used to have, if they thought Malud, you know, the evil eye, so they would make these, they would go to the convent, and the nuns would make amulets that you would wear, but you would wear it under your shirt. You didn't want somebody else to know you had it, because otherwise, you know, they wouldn't bother to do Malud. I don't remember how it worked, but I remember wearing one. And so it was fun that she found that book, and I could tell her, yeah, this is a real thing.
And the funny thing about that, I found that book on TikTok, so like we've been saying social media isn't all that good, but that was the one good aspect of social media.
Well, another thing, Pam, I wanted to say, like growing up when my father came here, it's kind of ironic because there was a certain group or a certain Italians that hid that they were Italian, right? They assimilated, they spoke English, they didn't want to go back. They came here for a reason. And now I find that, like myself, I'm trying to get my dual citizenship, like, you know, I want to go back, but didn't appreciate it until, like she said, later in life, you know, when you have the time and then maybe your parents are older or whatever, and then you start appreciating, think, gosh, you know, what they sacrificed, and I do want to be more involved or this or that. But the other thing is like for instance, I had the Italian American Heritage Month, and during that month, I tried to put something for everybody, and even there was an outing to the racetrack, and like my son came to that, both my sons, you know, they brought all their friends because that was cool, that was something that they liked. So if you find and pick and choose things that might pertain to them, or that they might enjoy, you know, that's an avenue to get them involved. You just have to look what's out there. There's so many things, you know, if we get the Fenoi or whatever, there's so many things going on, and just say, hey, did you see this? You know, maybe attend that or something, I don't know.
There's the Festa della Familia here at Casa every August. That's, you know,
Do they
everybody
come to
brings their
that?
whole extended family, so
Yeah.
that's a good one too.
Yeah, so it's just gotta be
Yeah,
something that
absolutely.
speaks to them or perks their interest, but they'll get there. Don't give up. I'm not giving up on my children.
Christina, you wanted to say something?
My sons are 40, 29, and 30. And, you know, they're grown men, right? There's not much I can force them to do. But I found that, especially with them being musicians, that early on, the practice isn't mine, it's theirs. If the parent insinuates themselves, I think, too much in something you're trying to build as a passion, it may not build as a passion, right? So stepping back, I think, can be really good too, but simply you doing and being excited about your interaction with the community then does influence them. My middle son he's a bass player and he's a tuba player. So he ended up playing for Banda Napolitana, and you know, he was at the feast, and he was down at St. Rocco's, and he was over at the one with the wires. I can't remember which one that is. Yeah, but you know, so I would march behind him, and you know, it may not be everything that I wanted him to take on, but he was there, and he was making music, and in the same way that his great-great-grandfather made music in those same festivals. So, you know, I think sometimes we want everything, we want them to do everything, because we're understandably emotional about the continuation of the culture here. But they're also assimilating. These are fourth generation people.
Right.
What's reasonable? And my hope is that, you know, writing the book, they all read it, they're writing me reviews of it. It's really great. They're writing really interesting reviews, comparing it to mafia movies and what the difference is, and I'm thrilled, right? But they might not come here with me, but they're doing something else, they're participating. And I think that on some level, in each generation, what that interaction with the culture is going to look like is going to be different. So it's not going to be the exact way, but is it something, and is it something that's important to them and that they're giving back? Yeah, I think that's, for me, that's the main thing. And it may be when I'm not here anymore, but I think they'll be to Italy. I think they are very interested in the history, particularly not just immigration, but financial histories, political histories of Italy itself. So that's my hope too, is that they go back to the as well as communing with the Italian American community, but also dipping back into Italy itself and having a more cosmopolitan, international intelligence of what it means. So I think we're on the track. It's a couple more than the other ones, but that's okay.
And the identity,
Mm-hmm.
the carrying on the identity of it.
Yeah, I think to a degree. Yeah. Thank you, Kai.
I think that some of us circle back too. I know in my own experience, I was immersed in my Italian American, my Italian heritage. I worked for the Italian Railway, and then I stepped back to become a parent and raise a daughter, and then in my career, and now I've come full circle, and I'm volunteering here.
Right,
So
exactly.
it's when the opportunity lends itself, and you try to take advantage of these functions and things as much as you can, but I think our lives get busy, and so we do the best we can, you know, and you sometimes come back to it, you know, full circle. So, did someone else have a question? Or?
So, do you think that with social media expanding and stereotypes being put out, do you think that might like ruin some of the like identities of different minority groups?
I will jump right in, yes. With stereotyping especially, I believe heavily in trying to break down stereotypes. So like mafia movies, like The Godfather, or shows like The Sopranos. I've also never seen The Sopranos. I have seen The Godfather though.
Good
but
movies.
I think movies like that, shows like that, and people acting like they're these big, rich mob bosses, even though they're not that at all, definitely has hurt the Italian culture. And people like, I don't want to say people like us, but regular, everyday people, not people associated with these stereotypes, really, need to be telling our story, and we need to be telling the truth about Italian culture, because if not, we're going to continue to look like the way, or we're going to continue to be perceived the way we might currently still be perceived.
Yeah, due to movies and shows.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'm sorry.
I wanted to address that. You know, it seems like the more that we tell our stories, about our backgrounds, our hopes, the more that we go to activities here and actually lead by example to some of these things and the influence that we have, we really don't know the extent of that influence. You know, we talk about maybe going to the feast, but then when you go to the feast and you start talking to people and you bring friends with you, friends and family with you, it may not be until years later that they finally make the connection. But our own example, telling our own stories and being our best examples, advocating for ourselves, really is one of the keys to bringing, bringing identity, not only to women, but the whole ripple effect of that. You know, the men that they love, the children, the families, the heritage. That all comes together. But if we are silent, if we don't tell our stories, if we don't write, again, if we don't write, W-R-I-T-E, the wrongs, then we will be silenced. We will have no further impact.
Very good point. Christina?
Yeah, this is a topic that I really straddle, and I think my family does as well. I'm just going to preempt that by saying I think every group out there has stereotypes, and those stereotypes are reflected in various media, including, particularly in film, right? I had major surgery in December, and while I recovered, I binge watched The Sopranos. So I watched it from the beginning to the end because it was entertaining. It was from an artistic standpoint, right? I've seen The Godfather. Godfather 2 is my favorite of the series. I understand there are stereotypes there. I'm not buying into the stereotypes, but I'm also interested in the genre. It's a genre, I think, and I'm not afraid of it because I can stand up and say, and then there's also this, and then there's also that. I mean, Mario Puzo wrote The Fortunate Pilgrim as well as The Godfather and The Sicilian and all of those things. Which ones do we know about? Which ones do we put forth? I don't necessarily, I'm not afraid of the stereotype. And I think there's another thing as a writer that comes in with the stereotype as well, right? So I'm writing a great-grandmother character, and she's dressed in black. And someone comes to me and says, well, that's a stereotype. You can't put her in black. But the reality is, it's a stereotype because they wore black, especially once they were widowed. So we're doing some things to try to evade stereotype that I think they're like one step, as opposed to like 15 steps of the complexities of what's potentially happening there. And Fred Gardafe says, or Gardafe actually, I think, says something about sense of humor, that Italian American art, well, looking at itself in film in particular, is very serious about it, that we have not yet learned to laugh along with the gallows humor of something. So can we look at something like The Sopranos as partly satire, I think, becomes a question too. It doesn't mean we take it on. We don't have to take it on. We're beyond it. It's just a piece of art. So that's I'm just forming these ideas as I speak, but that's kind of my stance on it. Don't be afraid of it, but put the other thing out there that you want to see. If you have seen The Godfather, but you've never read The Fortunate Pilgrim, you need to get a copy of The Fortunate Pilgrim. If you haven't read Tina DeRosa's Paperfish, you need to get a copy of Paperfish. The work is out there. It just doesn't get the attention, and we are the ones, I think, who have to bring it the attention so that there's at least a balance, right?
We've got books.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. That's a segue.
We have the women's book, and we have the Reconstructing Italians in Chicago book. There are two anthologies. There might be 30 or 40 different writers writing from different perspectives, and hardly anybody talking about the mafiosi. So we need to do our homework. We need to read. Other ethnic groups have gained, through literature, a respect for themselves and a self-respect that I don't think that we have ever achieved. Italian American writers always complain that there are no Italian-American readers.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's interesting because I can't help but think of, the stereotypes that's been around for a long time now. I remember years ago, they were really on Italian-American actors to not take a role that maybe put down being an Italian-American. But then again, these people wanna work.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tough situation. I don't remember who the actor was right now, but it was years ago, and they were on his case because they wanted him to do this Italian-American, type stereotyped role, and he just wanted the work. So, I don't know, it's really hard when you need money. How do you say, I'm just not gonna work because that puts my Italian-Americanness down? Not everybody's strong enough to do that, so who am I to judge why someone takes a job or not? I don't know.
Well, and the best Italian-American stuff has been done by Italian-Americans.
Absolutely.
True that.
The mafia stuff.
Oh, is there another question? Great,
I
yes.
just wanted to say,
Hi, Frank.
beyond, Sopranos, Godfather, the Godfather's 50-some years ago, Sopranos 25 years ago. Today, with all this social media, there's a tremendous influence for younger people. And we are our own worst enemy as a community because of the fact that we perpetuate this horrible image, because there's a lot of idiots out there, young people talking like morons, and they got 10 million followers, and that's all it's about. And now all these other kids think that that's Italian, and our own Italian-American community nationally perpetuates and furthers the careers of these people. And that's where we are our own worst enemy, okay? And that's a fact of life, okay? This is horrible image, and that's what young people see. And then these are the people that our leaders nationally are bringing to conferences, are getting in the business with, okay? Which blows my mind. Now, how do we combat it? We keep doing what, like this panel said, do your stuff. But it's a tough battle. And it's a very tough battle. And our people are the ones going with that. Why? Because they're selling their soul to the devil for followers and likes, okay? And unfortunately, if you do this video about A.P. Giannini, 50 likes are gonna come. But if you talk like an idiot and got salami waving, you're gonna get 10 million. And I'm not trying to be funny, and it's really the truth. So we are our own worst enemy. We perpetuate that. I wish we could stand up to our people and say, hey, dummy, stop doing that. Stop. Not the young people, I get it. They're making money, and that's what it is. But it's our older people even that are buying into this because the almighty followers, the almighty likes, okay? I said enough.
Piero is a volunteer here at the Italian Cultural Center as well, so our colleague, so we thank him for joining us today. Yes.
I just want to say thank you to Lisa for doing Heritage Month a few years ago during the pandemic. I was hooked on it. I was on it every day looking at what you had and reading it. And, and then at the dinner table, I would tell my husband, did you know that blah, blah, blah was Italian?
Right.
So it was really great.
Thank you for saying that. That really means a lot to me because we never did that before. So it's something I brought to the JCCIA and put a different Italian American on the calendar every day so people would learn more about our Italian Americans and what they contribute to society. And on top of doing like the other events, during the day. So we've been doing that every year. I'm not handling it anymore, but the other great thing was Italian Restaurant Week. I know Chicago has Restaurant Week, suburbs have Restaurant Week, so that's something I started as well, Italian Restaurant Week. And I don't know if it's going as well, it's just, a lot of Italian, there's so many, and getting to them and asking them to participate, but that's another thing that happens during October. So there are many things, and I'd like to thank Paul, because Paul and, who's the girl who does this, Mary? Is it Mary? Who does like the graphics? Because our first, sorry?
For the Franoi?
Yes,
Paul Basil?
yes.
Mary Lucilla.
Mary, begins with an R, Russ.
Well, she helped with, cause the first 2 years, the calendar was, not as beautiful as it is in the last couple years. So they really helped me with that, and I'd like to thank them for that. And again, you know, all the people who, Frank and Diana, who contributed to making it also a success. So, yeah, please, like I said, Pam, there's always some type of event going on, whether it's during that month or any other time to be involved in. So I really appreciate everybody being here and listening to us, and just stay involved. No matter how little, like we said, or how much, but just being involved is really huge.
Thank you, thank you.
I just
Yes.
want to mention my perpetual criticism of Italian American activities as being 95%, or if not 99%, social and eating events.
That's part of
And
culture.
1% culture, or focusing on the Italian and Italian American culture. But I guess in just getting together socially, that does some perpetuation of the culture and the connectedness of the people. But I would like to see them talking and thinking about art, culture, language, the Italian American immigrant experience. I'm disappointed that the Italian American community didn't reach out to the migrants who come to town, instead of being obsessed by the burden that these migrants are bringing. So welcoming them as we hope, in retrospect, to have had our grandparents welcomed. But
Well, I think the difference is when our parents came, at least I know, I'm speaking for my father, he had to be sponsored. They were on the books, they came through, whether they misspelled their name when they wrote it down, you know, you and your family, whatever. So they were documented.
well, my father was illegal.
Yeah. A lot of them, but let's say I'm speaking, you know, for my family, and but that's a whole political situation. Yeah.
But to speak about food and our culture, Umberto Eco, an Italian author, has been translated. His books have been translated into many different languages. And one of his translators, I believe she was Russian, or did Russian translations, she said that she felt culturally Italian and you know, felt very welcome in Italy, and didn't seem to have a problem until it was a conversation turned to food. And so they would be at a restaurant and the conversation would turn to food, and she felt that she couldn't actively participate. This was her take. She wrote this book on it. She wrote a cookbook, and she said because a lot of our culture is represented in food, and not just that, but a lot of the words that we have. The connotation, bread means something, pane means something different, and Umberto Eco brought this out too in one of his book presentations. Pane means something different to an Italian American than it does to other cultures. You know, to us it means sustenance, you know, and a meal is not complete without bread, so it has a different meaning. And so she felt that she couldn't actively participate, so maybe a lot of reason why food is so important culturally and socially is because it is important culturally. There are words that we have in our vocabulary that can't be expressed, you know. I don't know, that's just something that I took from reading that I don't mean to rebut, I'm just something that I
Okay,
picked up
yeah,
on.
well, food is important, but I'm always afraid that when you focus on Italian Americans, again, 90% of the oxygen is taken up by food and mafia, and all the other parts of Italian culture, Italian American experience, are left with the 10% or less of the time and energy that's left.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, but the thanks goes to our panel. We're so honored. Thank you for being so caring, for deepest thoughts with us, and being so honest. with us today. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you. And hope that you'll come to some of our other events. We have the Italian American Authors event on April 13th. Christina will be participating in that, so we're excited to have her back again as well. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you.
We'll stay around for a while. I should be here for another half hour at least. If you want to take a look at the library or any of the exhibits.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a beautiful day.